just a by way of introduction, my name is Mark Roach. I'm the project lead for Auckland UNESCO City of Music, which I do concurrently as part of my role with recorded music, and Damian Vaughan is with us, who is the chief executive of recorded music. So yeah, it's a fairly broad-ranging role, advocating for and specifically for the music community in Auckland City, and then recorded music itself advocates for the music community nationally. Should I throw it over to, I guess that's probably an intro to you, Damian.
Oh, sure. Hi, I'm the Chief Executive of Recorded Music New Zealand. So we're the trade body and national group for the record industry here in New Zealand. So I suppose from the equivalent of the RIAA, Sound Exchange, the Grammys, Billboard, all wrapped up in one organisation here in New Zealand. But due to our scale, that all makes sense. We're approximately about 15 people. And we do all of those kind of activities on behalf of the recorded music sector here in New Zealand. We're also part of the Auckland UNESCO City of Music, which Mark spearheads for us, amongst other things. But our primary function is the IFPI and national group representing the recording sector in New Zealand. Our members are the three major record labels, but also all of the independent rights holders and New Zealand independent artists and sound recording rights owners in New Zealand. In addition to that role, my main role, I also, and this is going to be a good segue too, I also sit on the board of MusicHelps, which is our industry charity, and we're joined by Peter Dickens, who's our GM, who runs the business. And I'll give it to you to explain what MusicHelps does.
Fantastic. Very smooth, Damian. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name's Peter. I'm General Manager of MusicHelps. And MusicHelps is a charity that does it has two primary roles. We develop and support projects in the community that use music to help people in need. So that's things like music therapy in hospices and hospitals, music with at-risk and vulnerable young people, and also music with disabled people. Projects like that, right from the very north to the very south of the country. But also what we do is we provide emergency assistance, both financial and mental health and wellbeing assistance to Kiwi music people that are experiencing illness, distress and hardship. And in that, we very much consider our counterpart charities and colleagues in this area to be organisations like Support Act, Unison Fund, Music Cares, Help Musicians UK, Sweet Relief, Music Support. There are any number of organisations around the world that have a part to play in that area. And it's a very small operation, but over the course of our history, we've probably delivered in excess of 250 to 300 face-to-face counselling sessions with registered professionals for Kiwi music people, and we've distributed thousands and thousands of dollars in emergency financial assistance packages to Kiwi music people and who are experiencing financial distress as a result of illness or injury or misfortune, or indeed, at the moment, what we're facing now. And I can go into a bit more detail about what we've done and what we've just completed with regard to that. But it's interesting to see that the virus is actually hitting both sides of our operation. There are issues for people that are trying to use music to help people, vulnerable people in need in the community. But also, of course, there are the problems that we're all very aware of music people who are trying to make their way in music, put food on the table, put a roof over their heads. There are, of course, the very major issues that they're facing through what's going on at the moment. So, hello, everybody. So, do you want to start off with that? Do you want to start off with what we're facing with Kiwi music workers, or where would you like to go?
Sure, go get into it, Peter, I reckon. Okay,
well, I think the interesting thing about when, firstly, it hit very quickly, and I think that you'll find that the charities deal in this area have had to retool and reorient very quickly, and some are still working out exactly what they're going to do. I think that most of the support organisations that work with music people in the various markets have been concentrating on getting the resources together to provide some kind of effective and prompt and meaningful response, whatever that means. And we've certainly been no different. So to do that, what we first needed to do was get together an effective campaign front that we thought would engage people from outside music in the issues that music was facing. So to do that, we developed a campaign called MusicHelps Live, which we've launched, and provides an umbrella platform, if you like, or environment under which not only can we put our own fundraising efforts, but also we can put information on how the public can help music people in other ways, and particularly artists, although that's very much just one sector of what's happening. So in terms of making people aware of the importance of streaming, of purchases through Bandcamp, of merch, and all of the rest of it, we've tried to provide routes for people to engage in ways that they may not have engaged with with music people before. And also we've given them something attractive that talks very directly about what they're facing, and what they're and the way we put it is, are you going to help us keep the music alive? In terms of so that's moving along quite nicely at the moment. We've raised probably about 350,000 New Zealand dollars at present. We have a goal of about 2 million. In terms of what we're going to do with that money, that's a really interesting question. First response has been immediately to put out an emergency response grant to music people. And we've had very, very simple criteria for that. You had to show that you'd lost income as a result of COVID-19, that you're a New Zealand citizen or resident, that you had a history of working in music for around 2 years, or for the majority of your adult working life. And there are a couple of other criteria around bank accounts, etc. That was very, very heavily subscribed. In a matter of 3 or 4 hours, we were pretty much maxed out on that. And that's been, I believe, the experience around the world, probably most notably in the UK, and Help Musicians UK's response to their emergency grant, which was £500 sterling, which had extraordinary demand. And I know that they've reviewed that grant very heavily and have changed their approach. Now, I think the discussion that we're having is, what do we do to help the environment? How do we help people survive stasis? People and organisations to survive stasis for as long as that stasis needs to occur, needs to stay in place. And how do we help them restart after that? And there are a lot of really interesting conversations about that. We're even starting to ask the really hard questions, which are ones like, it's becoming clear that not everybody is going to be able to continue their career in music. And that's a very, very sobering conversation to have. But it's one that we shouldn't shy away from. And those people that were making their way in music, that was the way that they were putting food on the table and a roof over their heads. What are we going to do to help them? If they can no longer do that in music, then how are we going to help them transition to some other way of doing that? Because that we would like to be a positive part of the solution and making that happen.
Can I add a question into the mix? Because we've been talking with various geographies and cities and about the mix of that. And one of the comments that keeps coming up is it was broken before, right? So that we already had issues of people making a living in music. And this now brings to bear the fact that we've got really deep systemic issues. Is that better in New Zealand? Is it the fact that there's a good balance and this is just now temporarily broken, or is there some core issues that this brings to light?
Very much depends on who you speak to. There are some people who would say that the environment in New Zealand, particularly if you're an emerging artist, if it's something you want to, you're very much encouraged to do this. I mean, we have entrenched in our school system that you can receive serious academic credit for songwriting, for instance, and that was something that
we don't have that.
That was a great win a couple of years back, And there are various schemes that are well publicised. So if you have done that and you've got yourself band together and you've written a song and you want to take it to the next level and make a video or get it recorded professionally, there are definitely schemes and routes that you can go to make that happen. So some people would say that it's incredibly supportive. Others would say that it's not supportive enough and that it's too hard and that we don't value our artists, we don't value our creatives, we don't support the overall environment very well at all. So it very much depends on who you speak to.
Yeah, I would add to that as well. It does depend. We've been, as the industry body for the recorded sector, we've been working collaboratively with all the other organisations and the other industry groups in the sector and been leading that kind of response to government. We're in a position where we can estimate and have done for many years the value of the music sector to the totality of New Zealand. And we estimate that we've probably lost 30%, 40% perhaps of overall revenues and workforce, and that's what we'll lose this year. But it's hit different sectors harder than others, and this will be the same in every other territory, I'm sure, but certainly the live music sector has been hit the hardest and is the first to close, and they're probably the last one to come out, is the phrase that we've been hearing all over the world, but especially one we've been using locally when we've been talking with government. Unable to host events with any scale, and as with many other countries, we're in an alert level system where New Zealand's been in a lockdown for a month, and we've got another extension. We were told 2 days ago, gents, was it, from the Prime Minister, that it'll be extended for another 3 weeks, where we're all confined to our homes. And then it'll go to alert level 3, possibly for another month or two, who knows. And then alert level 2, at which point you can hold events with 100 people. But for the live music sector, that's next to, it's a start, but it's not something that's going to sustain what was quite a large section of our music industry. And that's quite concerning for the next 12 to 24 months and what that looks like on the other side.
How much is live intertwined then with other parts of music and other sectors there that might be different than other geographies? I'm sort of thinking, of course, of the advertising markets and what streaming looks like there as opposed to other markets. And I guess the news in the past 24 hours is that Google's asked all of their people to cut their budgets in half because they're seeing a mass need to retrench Google, which is a global question, which had me kind of gulp today. How much is the advertising and other, I mean, music tends to be hit with all the revenue models right now, right?
Yeah,
Advertise taking a hit, subscription models are deeply embedded, can't sell physical product. Is there anything that's different about New Zealand that might be a golden light to this, or that?
I'd like to say yes, but I don't think so. I think we're more akin to Australia and our bigger brothers in the UK and the US and Canada and so forth. No, we collectively license broadcast and public performance as an entity, as our colleagues do in the author societies for songwriters, and then also represent all the labels and rights holders that sell and stream music. I suppose the one thankful thing is that streaming, which is 75% of our revenue, the recorded music sector, it's such a massive chunk, and it has barely been affected. So that's great news, and that's one thing that's stayed the course. And we monitor that, and we've only seen a drop since lockdown of about 5% in consumption. So it's there or thereabouts, which is quite good. And we know that that's probably because of, people using streaming services in their daily lives and daily commutes. It's just not happening anymore. You got more access to audiovisual content at home, like Netflix and the like. That's what's taking up people's time. So that's one saving grace that streaming's holding and doing well. The broadcast areas, so that's probably about 15% of the industry, the radio kind of and television income that we derive from communication rights. That's had been hit significantly because our license tariffs are based on a share of the advertising from the commercial radio stations and commercial TV networks. So yeah, we share their pain, but the difficulty there is that their audiences have actually risen completely. Because more people are home, got time to watch and time to listen. However, they can't monetize because no one's advertising, because all the other businesses are going through difficult times. And that extends to our public performance licensing area, which is a significant chunk of revenue to the industry as well. The licensing of retail shops and hospitality spaces, everything's closed. No one advertises, well, minimal people advertising. So we're expecting in that space anywhere between 50 and 60% drop off. One saving grace, I'll just go back to, is that streaming is a good light. What we have found is domestically, and this is probably true in other territories as well, was we've started to look really insular about how can we improve the New Zealand music available to the New Zealand public, and get that proportion up. And it's not, build the percentage of New Zealanders listening to New Zealand music rather than imported content, which is always been there, but I think it's become more prominent in the conversation locally. It's fair to say, hey, Mark, that New Zealand music needs to be more across our airwaves and needs to be more across on streaming platforms.
To add to that point, I think from certainly from my point of view, from an Auckland city or from a city perspective as well, that no doubt that this pandemic is an awful thing and wrecked our communities as well as our immediate music community. But if there's silver linings to take from it, it's the opportunities this will now present to get us back on our feet, and that the disruption caused by the pandemic gives us an ability to sort of table solutions based on our creative industries that possibly wouldn't have got traction, a month ago. So we can put those ideas on the table. As like Damian's saying, it's like now is the time that we should be pushing our local content more strongly than ever because it's so needed. And at the same time, this is where we lobby and we argue hard for the need to protect our local live music venues, our grassroots music venues, for instance, those R&D labs of the music industry, and for other initiatives that will, as I say, that in the past they might have gone, oh yeah, that's possibly a nice to have that we should look at. Now it's sort of like these are kind of essential tools that will get not only the music community back on its feet, but in fact our entire community back on its feet.
And in our circumstances, we have a high proportion of imported music as an English-speaking country, and because of our scale, we don't produce anywhere near as much as what's imported out of there. So percentage-wise across radio and streaming services, we're 10 to 20% local content. There's no quotas or anything like that. Whereas I know in some European countries where the language changes, that consumption of domestic stuff is a higher proportion because there's more of an affinity there. We have a high level of importing of American and British and other English-speaking country and their content. And that does make it a challenge for us. But reiterating what Mark said, it's really put the spotlight on what more can we do to support our locals. Because we don't have a local industry here. We are just importing music from overseas, and there won't be that passion, that drive, and we'll miss a whole generation of people creating.
Do you have any anecdotes of artists and creators who are doing above and beyond in the community to be then a local story and a local narrative?
Certainly, as far as MusicHelp Live is concerned, it's been very easy to get artist buy-in, and a lot have stepped up to do their part. I imagine that by the end of next month, then probably pretty much all of the top 20 artists, New Zealand artists by revenue, would have done something positive towards the cause.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say our patrons, Peter, are our two most well-known international New Zealand artists, and Lord and Neil Finn. So we've got good backing there.
Yeah.
But also, they're also there. I've been, the different models. Necessity is the mother of invention, and the different models that artists are using to try and generate revenue. Another, artist who was our hearts went out to her, Nadia Reid, who had a major US tour planned, literally pulled from under her feet when all the restrictions went into place. She used a model where she sold tickets on Eventbrite to I think it was a password protected Zoom session for a show, and it was incredibly well patronized. I think 400 or 500 people were there, and it showed that that this lockdown content can be monetized.
Yeah.
And there are in very quick time a local crowdsourcing platform developed a streaming capability, and the issue there, the benefit there is that they already had the payment platform in place. What they didn't have was the ability to stream the visuals and the audio, and turning that kind of development work around into 2 or 3 weeks has been an incredible achievement, and that's gone live today.
Cool.
And luckily for us, the first couple of artists are donating what they're making from that stream to the MusicHelps line. So some positive things happening there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the questions that's come up repeatedly across the day so far today is we're looking kind of near term, midterm, and then what kind of, when we're getting some stasis exhaustion and trying to figure things out, what are the patterns to talk in New Zealand about what rollouts could be, or how to deal with the uncertainty, or how to deal sort of culturally with the next phases? What have been the conversations and structures around that?
Well, I mean, we've just put in our request to government last week, so I kind of can talk about that kind of where we saw what immediate needs we asked for. That really is a short-term thing. There, we did put in commentary about what we need to see the sector recover long-term, but so many unknowns that I just don't think that it's possible to kind of frame them well. But certainly, we've New Zealand's got a long history of government support in the arts and the creation of content. We have a number of government agencies that are set up to support not only the making of music, so we can get grants for recording songs and making music videos and albums. They've also got whole entities that promote New Zealand music generally across radio and streaming, and have government employed people that can pitch to radio stations and streaming services, which is, I don't know if anyone does that around the world, but
I'm not sure.
We are very lucky that we have that those organizations doing that. And yes, they support the independence in our country, but they also are there and available to the majors as well. So there's a strong support from government for recognizing New Zealand's culture and making stuff that we can all be proud of. So a lot of the requests we made for into the future was making sure that those entities were well funded and continued their good work and could continue to support the making of New Zealand music, artists being able to create without the requirement of other pressures that are that their families may be seeing. So kind of a PACE type scheme, and to financially support them in their work. And then also some support for making sure that we build on this New Zealand music campaign that we've started, but we're a long way to go. So that's really where we're focusing our efforts. There's another big piece, obviously, is about what does the live sector look like in 2 years' time and 4 years' time. And there's so many unknowns, but at this current time, it is how's the best way to describe it, Peter?
The word that we use a lot is sobering.
Sobering.
That is the between saying stasis earlier, which is a great stay-at-home phrase because that's different, and then sobering. That's yeah. The other thing that we're seeing in some other countries, though, is increased political activism among artists and among venues. And before I turn that back over to Storm, because I keep asking you guys questions, are you seeing a change in, as I tend to put it, emergent structures? New people coming in going, we have to organize better, because that's in some of the stories for what we're going to have the rest of the sessions is we have new political activism on organizing that we needed to have in many countries and haven't had. Are you seeing any kind of movements to bring artists together or venues together or political action that's come into music other than the great work in fundraising around it?
Oh well, we've coalesced behind the industry so well. We already work functionally very cohesively as a group. All of our government action is collective. So us, the Authors Society, our local version of the MMF, the managers, the Indie Association, and the various government agencies, including our cultural agencies for Māori music. We all operate as one, and when we do government interaction or government lobbying, we do it collectively. So the sector is strong. One thing that's been even better this time around, if you can have something like that, is that we've joined forces with the promoters, which is not an industry sector that we've had too much to deal with. But it is, I do find that in New Zealand, even when I've done work on copyright stuff, when we explain how it works down here relative to, say, the UK or far larger territories where there's lots of more conflict and there's more people involved, that they're quite impressed with how we all work together as one unit, because that's the best way we can operate. But it's easy to do it as well. As get 10 people in a room. That's the New Zealand music industry kind of thing. It's not as bad as that, but
we've met
kind of true. At
least 12.
12. Sorry. Oh yeah, I forgot. It's kind of true. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Flight of the Conchords, but that's kind of how we operate.
No.
Also, going back in time, since time immemorial, the way that artists and others have been remunerated for creative output has either been through patronage or commoditization. And what we're seeing at the moment is, the complete falling over of commoditization of creative output. And I think what people's attention is moving to is patronage, and particularly, coming to your point, government patronage of the arts and of creative output, and the role that's going to have to play, which we're all hoping is going to be massively increased.
Yeah.
For the near and medium future.
One thing.
Go ahead, Damian.
I was just going to say one additional thing that I think maybe sets New Zealand slightly apart is our geographical area and the policy that our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who's done a phenomenal job of communication, but the policy of attempting eradication in New Zealand, which is what we are pursuing, is admirable. And we hope that because of our geographical isolation and keeping our borders closed, that we may, if we do eradicate in the next 6 months or whatever, we become possibly an island or a group of islands, as we are, that could be useful for other things. I know our sports community is contemplating inviting international competitions to be based in New Zealand if we're completely virus free, and that might work for music as well.
You have to take the athlete when they come in, and you have to totally soak them down with Lysol and cleanser, and make them.
You keep them in our beautiful landscape for 2 or 3 months, and I don't know if they'll complain. But we could host international. But the same thing could apply to music, right? International artists possibly being. Yeah,
we have. We have a couple of more minutes, and before we conclude, how can our folks reach out to you? What's the best contact information and a way to reach you? And if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat box, there are probably folks who want to continue the conversation or reach out to you and hear more.
Absolutely,
and
happy to.
We would appreciate that.